Next Gen fam,
What is up?
What's going
How
on?
we doing? I don't know if we're supposed to say the time we're recording it, but good morning. How's your coffee? You got some coffee next to you? It's a good day so far?
Next Geners are waking up. They're waking up, and unlike
ready.
I think a lot of folks, the first thing they're doing, they're not going to check their phone. They're not going to start scrolling. You know what they're going to do? They're going to wake up and they're going to figure out, how can I go build my life and business of my dreams? How can I go chase my potential, get better today, 1% each day, and learn from the best, learn from people like Nir, who we're absolutely pumped to have on today.
I think it's no coincidence that last night we had a group discussion with our community talking about the power of habits. Everybody's hopping on saying, I get up and I give myself 3 hours to do what I need to do to be my best self before I open the laptop, before I hit the work grind. I'm getting ready for that. And I know we're going to be talking about some habits and the power behind that on the hooked and indistractable side. So I'm fired up, Jay. We got a good one today.
DG, for me, this topic is so key. We just were talking about this last week. I think for me, one of the next big growth opportunities for me as a leader is taking just my attention, my presence to the absolute next level. And that's something I'm personally really focused on growing at in meetings throughout the day, my entire life. So with that, should we welcome this guy on? Should we get started? I have so much.
I got to be indistractable. I got to get the advice. Let's get him on. Jay, cool. Who are we bringing on board?
I am so excited to bring on Nir Eyal. He's a Wall Street Journal best-selling author. He's a public speaker, a consultant, author of Hooked, Indistractable. He writes, he invests, co-founded and sold 2 tech companies. He's the man, the myth, the legend. I lent Dylan his book and he hasn't given it back. He's been so addicted to it himself. Nir Eyal, welcome to the Next Gen Momentum Audio stage.
Oh, wow. So great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Nir, we are so grateful for you coming around the other side of the world, joining us here today. We're going to dive right in because at Momentum Audio, we waste no time. So Nir, I want to ask you take us back to the story. A $10 plug-in outlet timer changes your wife and your bedroom situation.
Wow. You are going to dive into this. To my sex life, first thing in the morning, before people have even had their cup of coffee. This is what we're going to talk about first and foremost. I love it.
Rock and roll.
All right, fine. Let's talk about my sex life. So my wife and I have been married for almost 20 years now, believe it or not. And I'll admit to you here and the world that a few years ago, we found that there was something lacking in our life, that every night my wife and I were going to bed, and instead of being intimate, my wife was caressing her iPad and I was fondling my iPhone, as opposed to being intimate with each other. Not only that, we weren't getting proper rest. I mean, we've all heard the research. It's pretty unequivocal. You have to get enough sleep for your physiological as well as psychological well-being. So in these 2 respects, we were not doing what we said we were going to do. We wanted to go to bed on time. We wanted to have some quality snuggle time together, and we weren't. We were on our devices night after night, and that was having a real impact on our relationship, as well as our well-being in terms of how much sleep we were getting. And so we wanted to take on this problem. And we did. We actually solved the problem. And I'm going to tell you how we solved that problem. But first, I want to back up a bit to tell you that the problem was not the technology. Originally, I thought that was the problem. And I think many of us think this, right? Many of us think, we saw The Social Dilemma, and it tells us that technology is hijacking our brains, that it's addicting everyone. There's nothing you can do about it. The big bad algorithms have got you. And let me tell you right here, right now, that is ridiculous garbage. It is not true. That it is not the technology that's the problem. In fact, people have been struggling with distraction for thousands of years. Plato, the Greek philosopher, 2,500 years ago, called it akrasia in the Greek, the tendency that we have to do things against our better interest. So if Plato was struggling with this very same problem, I don't know if he had this problem with his wife that I had, but if he was struggling with the same problem of distraction 2,500 years ago, it can't be Facebook and the iPhone that's doing it to us. There has to be a deeper reason. And so this is part of the reason why I wanted to figure out for myself as well for other people, how do we gain this superpower of the century? How do we become indistractable? How do we have the power to finally do whatever it is we say we're going to do? Because here's the problem. We all basically know what to do. We know what to do, right? Who doesn't know that if you want to have a healthy body, you have to eat right and exercise? Does anybody need to buy a diet book to tell you that? We know this already. Does anybody not know that to have good relationships with the people you love in your life, you have to be fully present with them? We know that. Does anybody not know that if you want to excel at your job, you have to do the work, especially the hard stuff that other people don't want to do? We know this. That's not the problem. If you don't know it, Google it. It's all there on the internet for you. The problem is not that we don't know what to do. The problem is we don't know how to stop getting in our own way. We don't know how to stop getting distracted. And so that's what becoming indistractable is all about.
Nir, that is such a reframe to the popular messaging that we're getting out there, which is that we're being inundated, we're being attacked, and we're have to play defense. What you're saying is flip the script. We're in charge of our own lives. We have been forever, and there's a way we can take control. And I think your career has been such a really interesting story because you've started on all sides of this industry. I want to go back. Sunshine Biz Dev. You're working on placing online ads on Facebook. You're getting interested in psychology. So what is that side of the table, being in the psych marketing growth world, helped understand for you when you're thinking about this indistractable concept?
Yeah, so it was exactly this exposure that I had inside the belly of the beast, right? So my last company was at the intersection of advertising and gaming. And this is where I learned these techniques that these companies use, right? And so my first book was called Hooked: How to Build Habit-Forming Products. And the idea behind that book was to steal the secrets that I learned working with companies like Facebook and Twitter and Zynga and Instagram and WhatsApp and Slack, learning their psychological secrets so that the rest of us can build products and services to get people hooked for good. And that's exactly what happened since Hooked was published. All sorts of industries, companies like Kahoot, the world's largest educational software company, uses the Hooked model to get kids hooked onto online learning. Companies like Fitbod get people hooked to exercise. I've worked with companies in all sorts of industries, from the New York Times to healthcare to SaaS products, all kinds of products to help people form good habits in their lives. In fact, I just invested in a company, I put my money where my mouth is, called Cutback Coach, that uses the Hooked model to help people cut back on the amount of alcohol they drink. Right. So there's all kinds of ways that we can use this very same psychology that keeps us checking Facebook and Instagram to actually help us build good habits in our lives. But the flip side is that sometimes products are so good, they're designed to be so engaging, that sometimes some of us can go too far. We can get distracted because we live in an age, thank goodness we live in an age, where we have all these amazing technologies that do so much for us. So it's really about the kind of the price of progress is that we live in a world with so many engaging things, but that doesn't mean we're powerless. In fact, I believe that we are much more powerful if we understand how to use the technologies as opposed to letting the technologies use us.
Nir, I love that. Such a powerful reframe. And it puts the onus on us as, hey, I'm the responsible party. But Nir, I want to ask you, for our listeners out there, the next generation of entrepreneurs.
Can I just jump in real quick? Because you said such an important term there, that it is about responsibility, not fault. Okay, it's not your fault that Facebook exists. It's not your fault that the iPhone is so engaging. It's not your fault that Netflix has all these amazing shows on it. And frankly, would we want it any other way, right? We want, what are we gonna say? Hey, Netflix, your shows are really good. Okay, please make them boring for me. Apple, your phone is so user-friendly. Can you please make it harder to use? That's ridiculous, right? We want these products to be good, of course. And it's not your fault that they are. You didn't invent Facebook. You didn't invent the iPhone. So it's not your fault. But it is, as you said, your responsibility. Lots of things in life are not your fault, but they are your responsibility.
That is so powerful. Talk about a mic drop there. I want to quickly go back to the Hooked model, Nir, because I know that's something I've learned from you in reading and learning more about your theory and your strategy. These are things that you don't have to be Facebook or Google to start applying. Right? We're talking to the next generation of entrepreneurs. Let's be real, sleeping on mom and dad's couch, eating ramen noodles. We don't have the ad spends that these behemoths do. So what is something that maybe is a basic tip or strategy, way to think about when I'm building a consumer-facing product, how I can start building positive reinforcement into that habit formation?
Yeah. And so this is why engagement is so much more important than growth. I know a lot of times we, as entrepreneurs, we think about, oh, I want my product to go crazy. I want virality. Everybody wants, viral growth, right? That's what we all want. But actually, what we find is that engagement should come before growth. That if you're just, spending lots of money on acquiring users, but you can't keep those users engaged, you're what we call a leaky bucket business, right? Leaky buckets, water comes in and leaks out. You don't want to spend money on user acquisition before you have nailed user retention and engagement, which is why building 4 habits is so important. Designing a product, not every business needs to be habit forming. Let me be very clear. If your product is something that people buy once, you don't need a habit. But if you're building the kind of product that requires repeat engagement, a health product, SaaS software that is going to be used by an enterprise, anything that requires repeat engagement, well, then the most important thing you could possibly focus on first and foremost is how do you bring people back? Remember, every business needs to be a GEM. GEM stands for growth, engagement, and monetization. This was developed by Reid Hoffman. Growth, engagement, and monetization. So growth is about how do you acquire those customers, and can you acquire them at a rate that is where the cost of acquisition is lower than the lifetime value of the customer. Then you have engagement. How do you keep people coming back? And then you have monetization. Can you sustain your enterprise by creating a profitable company? So each is necessary but not sufficient. These are the three pillars of your business. What I focus on is that middle portion of engagement.
For us, Nir, that reminds us a lot of what we talk about in Next Gen, which is slowing down to speed up, taking the time at the beginning to ensure that the pieces are clicked in the right way, which will enable you to grow faster. So I think Nir is telling you, if you're a startup founder, you're thinking about your SaaS product, okay, great, we'll get to the growth, we'll get to the number of users, but it's how much of those users are loving what they're doing, coming back all the time. And Dylan and I always think about that in our personal context as well. In the morning, we just had a great meeting yesterday on Clubhouse. Shout out to all the Next Geners who joined us about getting started in the morning. We get up, we're so excited to race right away, get going to the virality, get going to the building, but it's engagement. For us personally, taking time in the morning to breathe, whatever it might be. So for you as the individual, Nir, you know how much habits are important to you. Take us to your morning routine specifically. You don't have to go through the whole thing, but are there one or two habits that you've developed that really allow you to do that? Slow down, speed up, do what you do in the morning to get the rest of the day, that output you're looking for.
Yeah. Okay. So let's back up a second and talk about what is distraction, because this is really dovetails into your question. Distraction, even the word, is something that people think they understand. I thought I understood, but when I really dove into it, I didn't. Okay, so one of the best ways to see if you understand something is to see if you know the opposite of that thing. Can you properly explain what is the antonym of that word? So if you ask most people, what is the opposite of distraction? Most people will tell you the opposite of distraction is focus, right? I don't want to be distracted. I want to be focused. Makes sense, right? Not exactly. The opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction, if you look at the origin of the word, is traction. That both words come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull, and they both end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N, that spells action. So traction, by definition, is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do, things that you do with intent, things that help you move towards your values and help you become the kind of person you want to become. Those are acts of traction. The opposite of traction is, of course, distraction. Distraction is any action that pulls you farther away from what you plan to do, anything that is not in accordance with your values and pulls you farther away from becoming the kind of person you want to become. Why is this so important? And why do I answer this way when you ask me about what my daily routines are? Because you cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. So it is absolutely critical in this day and age. If you don't plan your day, somebody is going to plan it for you. I can't tell you how many people I talked to over the past 5 years in doing the research for my book. You hear them all the time today. These people who do nothing but complain about how distracting everything is, how they can't get anything done, how the modern world, they're running around all day. There's just no time to do all the things I have to do every day. And then when you ask them, wait a minute, what's actually on your schedule? What did you get distracted from today? What did you plan to do with the time that you spent doing something else? I don't know. Like, let me see your schedule. What's on it? Oh, a dentist appointment, maybe, right? Like one meeting I had. What? Then there's tons of white space. We cannot call something a distraction unless you know what you got distracted from. I mean, there's a reason that the language we use about time and attention is the exact same language we use around money. Think about it, right? We make time just like we make money. We save time just like we save money. We spend time just like we spend money. We pay attention just like we pay with dollars and cents. And so you wouldn't stand on a street corner and say, here's my wallet. Anybody, come take my money. And yet, why do we do that all day long with our time and attention? So to become indistractable, one of the most critical steps is that we have to turn our values into time. You have to turn your values into time. If I look at your schedule, can I see what your values are? And so with my schedule, I mean, I could show you my schedule. I time block every minute of my day. Okay. And that sounds rigid to people. Oh my gosh, is that any fun? Where do I get to be spontaneous? I'm telling you, I have a great life. I really enjoy my life. I'm in the best shape I've ever been. My business is doing better than ever. My relationships are better than ever before. You know why? Because I do what I say I'm going to do. If I tell my daughter I'm going to spend time with her, I'm with her and I do nothing else. But if I'm going to play some video games, if I'm going to watch something on Netflix, I can do that too, right? I can enjoy that too, because that's exactly what I say I'm going to do with my day. So my day typically starts, the same exact way, unless I've decided in advance to change it, where I wake up at 7 a.m., I have breakfast with my family. By 8 o'clock, I'm doing my writing time. I do writing time first thing in the morning. Then I've got my lunch time. I also have that with my family. And then in the afternoons is when I typically take my calls, calls, consulting arrangements, things like that. So it's pretty structured. Now, do I track every single 15 minutes of the day and, every little task? No, I batch tasks together so that if it's, 30-minute time blocks or so of different type tasks, then I've got those big chunks of time. But the important thing is, if you don't decide in advance how you will spend your time, somebody's going to decide for you. The news, Twitter, your boss, your kids, somebody's going to claim your time and attention and take it away from you unless you decide in advance how you want to spend it according to your values.
Next Gen fam, you're getting a masterclass in time management, in personal ownership, in prioritization. Nir, I know in a tweet you said, as a startup founder, you have one job, maybe a couple cascade from that, but you have one job: ruthlessly prioritize. And that's what you're helping us do. You have so much advice on how we can start combating this, because as you say, all distraction begins from within. It's not the world, it's me. It's not Netflix, it's me. So talk to us for teams now, for managers, for startup founders who are looking to act on this. They recognize the problem. My calendar is not mine. What are some of the things that I can chip away at to get to where we want to be?
Yeah, so we talked about traction. We talked about distraction, right? We talked about the left and right of things that I do with intent, things that I plan to do, things that are in accordance with my values and help move me towards becoming the kind of person I want to become. We talked about distraction, anything that is not that, right? Now, what prompts us to traction and distraction? We have two types of triggers, okay? The usual suspects when it comes to triggers are what people think of as external triggers. External triggers are the pings, the dings, the rings, anything in our outside environment that can lead us towards traction or distraction. Turns out, however, that studies find that only 10% of the time when people check their phones, do they check them because of an external trigger. Only 10% of the time that you check your phone, it's because of some notification. You know what the other 90% of the time, the other 90% of the time of why you check your phone? It's not because of the external trigger. It's because of what we call the internal trigger. An internal trigger is an uncomfortable emotional state that we seek to escape from. Boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty, anxiety, stress, all of these things feel bad. And the reason we get distracted, the reason we procrastinate, number one reason, it's not the stuff outside of you. It's not the pings, dings, and rings. The number one reason is because of a desire to escape discomfort. So if there's one lesson, the most important thing I can tell you right now is this. Listen carefully. Time management requires pain management. Let me say that again. Time management requires pain management. I'm telling you, I've read all the research studies. I've read all the gurus' books about how to manage your day and your schedule and the digital detoxes and all the tips and tricks. And I'm telling you, if you don't first and foremost understand what is that discomfort that you are trying to escape, it's not a character flaw. You likely don't have anything wrong with you. There's nothing broken about your brain. You just haven't learned the skill set to deal with those internal triggers in a healthy way that leads you towards traction rather than distraction. So that is the first step, mastering the internal triggers, especially if you make your own schedule. So if you are an entrepreneur, so entrepreneurs are what you call schedule makers. Okay, we have two types of people: schedule makers and schedule takers. A schedule taker, like an hourly employee, they don't usually struggle with distraction, at least not very much, right? So if you show up in a call center and you get paid by the hour and your job is if the phone rings, you pick it up, you answer the phone, you put it down and you wait for it to ring again, you're a schedule taker. You take the schedule for your hourly work. But if you're an entrepreneur, you have to make your own schedule, which is why it's so important to understand how to become indistractable, because if you don't do that, here's what's going to happen. And I've started 3 companies now. Here's what is always going to happen. You sit down at your desk. Okay, this would happen to me every day. I'd sit down on my desk and I'd say, okay, I've got that big project I have to work on. I've got that proposal I have to turn in. I got to pitch this business. I got this. I got to hire. I got this. I got all these. I'm going to work on that big project that I've been procrastinating on. Here I go. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to work on it. Nothing's going to get in my way. I'm not going to procrastinate. Here I go. But first, let me just check that email real quick. Right? Let me just do that one thing on my to-do list, that easy thing, just to get some momentum, right? I got to do it anyway. Email is a work-related task, right? And what I didn't realize is that I was allowing distraction to trick me into prioritizing the urgent and the easy at the expense of the important. That is where distraction is killing your productivity, because you think, oh, email is a work-related task. I got to do that at some point. No. If it's not what you plan to do with your time, it is just as much of a distraction as checking Facebook or playing a video game. So as a manager, you have to be able to control your attention and choose your life, because as you said, your job as an entrepreneur, more than anything you do, is prioritization. And it's only when we understand, when we have these trade-offs of what matters, what doesn't matter, what needs to get done now, what needs to get done a week from now, how do I make time now to work on the important stuff that I have to chip away at, even if it's not fun, day after day in order to get to my goal, that can only be done with the kind of concentration that comes from doing one thing at a time without distraction.
Nir, I feel so exposed out here because everything you're saying,
calling us out.
As you open this interview, you're calling out everybody, because you're saying we all know deep down how to go and how to operate, but maybe it's that skill set, as you talk about that roadmap of what are the specific tips, skills, environmental structures we need to break these. When it comes to email, this is where I feel most exposed, because it happens to me all the time. I'm like, I got to tackle this thing. I don't care if it's due in 3 months. I need to get it done today. So when it comes to email, I know you talk a lot about this in your books and in speaking. As an entrepreneur, as a businessman, speaker, you get a lot of inbound. I'm sure you get a lot of emails. For our entrepreneurs out there, we're on superhuman 24/7. How are we balancing your inbox? Any tips, any frameworks that you think about from your book that you can share on how to balance email management, et cetera?
Absolutely. So now we have all 4 parts of the model. So this is the most important thing is, I don't want to just teach you tactics. Tactics are cheap. Tactics are what you do. Strategy is why you do it. Okay. So there's lots of life hacks and tips and tricks, and I'll give you some. Okay. Those are important, but it's more important that you memorize the 4 strategies of the Indistractable model. Step number 1, master the internal triggers. Again, time management requires pain management. So in the book, I tell you exactly how to, there's over a dozen different things that you can do when you feel bored, when you feel stressed, when you feel anxious, as opposed to taking a drink, as opposed to turning on the news, as opposed to checking email to escape discomfort and give in to distraction. I'll show you exactly what to do instead to lead you towards traction. So that's step number 1, master the internal triggers. Step number 2, make time for traction. You have to plan your day. And I show you how to schedule sync with your boss, with your manager, with your colleagues, with your husband or wife or significant other. Very, very important, life-changing technique to do what I call a schedule sync. The third step is to hack back the external triggers. We know that these devices are hacking our attention, but that does not mean we are powerless. We can absolutely hack back. And I show you how to hack back meetings, how to hack back email, how to hack back group chat, how to hack back our kids, even if we're working from home. Kids can be very distracting when they tap you on the shoulder. I show you how to hack back all those distractions. The fourth step is to prevent distraction with pacts. This 4th line of defense, this last thing that we do as the firewall against distraction to make sure we don't go off track. Now, to go back to your question, email fits into the category of hacking back the external triggers, because there's nothing necessarily wrong with the technology of email. The problem is it's the constant pings and dings, the external triggers, that can lead us off track. Not only that, more than anything, with the clients that I've worked with, it's not even the external triggers as much as, back to step number 1, which is why it's the most important, it's the internal triggers, right? It's, I've got a bunch of emails waiting for me. right? What if somebody needs me? What if there's something urgent? It's that discomfort. Oh, and by the way, what I'm working on right now kind of sucks. And I would really like to not work on it anymore. So let me just check email for a quick sec, right? And procrastinate on what I really need to do. So it's really about understanding the internal as well as the external triggers. Now, I'm going to give you a very, very practical technique that you can use that can reduce the amount of time you spend on email by up to 90%, 90. Okay, so this is more tactical, but I think it's important to give you something that you can start using right away. Okay, here's how it works. Time studies show that where we waste time on email is not the checking, it's not the replying, it's the rechecking. That's where we waste time on email. What does this look like? What time studies show is that most people, when they check email, they open an email, they read it. Okay, that's not important. They put it away. They open the next email, read it, open away. 30 minutes later, wait, what was that email about again? Okay, let me open it again. What was in it? Was there anything important there? Was it good news? Was it bad news? It's the checking and rechecking that wastes time. So here's the thing. From now on, you are only going to touch each email 2 times. That's it. You're never going to touch an email more than twice. The first time you get that email, you have to label it by the most important information in that email, which is when does it need a reply? Not the subject, not the topic area. Don't categorize it like a file folder. Label it by when it needs a reply. So when might it need a reply? Either never, in which case delete it or archive it. Super urgent, about 1% of your emails are, oh my God, house is on fire. You need to respond to this right away. In which case, 1% of the time, even less sometimes, reply to it. 99% of the emails that are left are going to fall into one of 2 categories. Either something that needs to be replied to sometime today, not urgent, but sometime today. And then that's about 20% of your emails actually on average need to be replied to today. 80% of your emails can be replied to sometime this week. This is on average. This is what time studies show. So what I want you to do is when you get an email, label it by either today or this week. Now, back to step 2, making time for traction. You're going to have time in your schedule to reply every day to only the emails that need a reply today. Today, just the 20%, not all of them, just the ones that need a reply today. And you can, if you don't know how to create labels, Google it. It's very, very easy. Every email service program does it. So you're right now, you've already cut down the emails that you have to reply to every day dramatically now. But you say, what's the big deal? I have to reply to those other emails at some point, don't I? Like, where am I saving time? Here's where the magic happens. It turns out with those 80% of emails, something magical happens. Number 1, you stop playing email ping pong. What does email ping pong look like? Email ping pong is when we reply to emails just to get them out of our folder. And what we don't realize is that the more, if you want to receive fewer emails, you have to send fewer emails. So by getting emails out of your email inbox and into somebody else's inbox, you're just playing email ping pong back and forth and back and forth. Whereas if you slow that cadence down, not only will you get fewer emails in a given period of time, another incredible thing happens. Emails decay. Did you know that? They biodegrade over time. Why? Because if you let a non-urgent email just settle for a while, something magical happens. It becomes less important. People figure out their own answers to their questions. They use their brains as opposed to making you do the work. People will figure out their own crap if you let them, if you just give them a little bit of time for those emails that can be replied to within a week's time. So it turns out on average, half of those 80% of your emails will magically not even need a reply anymore. If you put them in the folder, and then, so for me, I have what's called Message Mondays. Every Monday, I have a 4-hour block of time, 4 hours, where I go through all those emails that require a reply, and on average, about half of them don't even need a reply. This will dramatically reduce the time you spend on email.
Wow. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Mic drop times a million. I feel, again, like personally attacked here in the best way because I can do so much better. I'm taking complete ownership. I'm holding. This is our pact right here. We're gonna hold each other accountable.
Responsibility, my man.
That's what it's about.
By the way,
right?
This is totally autobiographical. I mean, I wrote this book for me. I'm not lecturing you guys because this is what I went through. I was the most distractible person on earth. I was clinically obese. Okay, now at 43, I'm in the best shape of my life. I have a 6-pack for this. I'm not saying this to brag, but just showing you how consistently doing what you say you're going to do. Best shape of my life. My business is going better than ever. But that was not the case a few years ago. I mean, I was pulling my hair out. My relationship with my kid was terrible. I wasn't spending quality time with my wife. I wasn't getting anything done at work. Like, this is coming from a very vulnerable place. You will be reading about my journey, about how I went from very distractible to now indistractable.
I love that, Nir. And we so appreciate that honesty and that vulnerability. It'd be easy for you to come on here and say, delete the Netflix app on your iPhone. And maybe we'd feel better for that moment. But what you're saying is even more promising because I control it all. Dylan controls it all. Forget about the world. There'll be another Netflix next year. There'll be another Apple coming out with a new addicting iPhone. It's all in my court. And I love that.
Yeah. And if you want to, here's the thing. Very few people, I certainly never knew what this felt like. Very few people out there know what real leisure feels like, right? Because many of us are ruled by what I call the tyranny of the to-do list. I hate to-do lists, by the way. To-do lists, many people don't realize, running your life with a to-do list is one of the worst things you can do for your personal productivity, right? Now I'm not against writing things down, getting them out of your brain and writing them out on a piece of paper and an app. That's fine. But if you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is look at your to-do list as opposed to your schedule, you've already lost. You've made a huge mistake. Because the problem with the to-do list, well, there are many problems with to-do lists. One of the problems with the to-do list is that even when you get home from work and you just want to relax, you just want to, play with your kid, you want to play some video games, you want to just watch something on Netflix, you feel guilty because that to-do list is still not done, right? Nobody ever finishes everything on their to-do list because it's endless, right? So even when you just want to chill out, you feel shame and guilt about the fact that you should be doing something else, as opposed to when you are indistractable. If you do anything but the thing you said you're going to do, that's a distraction. So on my schedule, I have time to watch Netflix. I have time to go on social media. I have time to play video games. You can do whatever you want with your time. There's nothing evil about any of this technology, as long as you use it according to your values and your schedule, not the tech companies.
Love that. Love that, Nir. As we are already looking ahead, I can't believe it, but toward the end of our interview, I want to ask you on a personal related note. You were born in Israel, where a part of the culture is Shabbat, right? Following the Sabbath, taking a phone fast, if you will. And then you come to America and there's Silicon Valley where phone fasting is the new trend, right? What is your thought on this strategy of, I'm going to force myself away for 24 hours, 40 hours, 72 hours, whatever it is? Or does that leave us even more susceptible to then come back in and get sucked into my laptop like I never was before? What's your take on people trying to combat it that way?
So anything you want to do with your time is fine. It's not up to me or anyone else to tell you how you should spend your time, right? There's, I can't stand it when people say, oh, me, if I watch football, that's somehow okay. And these kids playing video games, that's frivolous. No, anything you want to do with your time, as long as you do it according to your values and your schedule, is great. I think what's interesting, speaking of my background being born in Israel, by the way, I left when I was 3 years old, so I'm much more American than Israeli now. But I went back to Israel almost every summer to visit my family, and I remember my grandmother was Orthodox. She was quite religious, and she did observe the Sabbath. And it was and I remember when I was a kid, she was a chain smoker, like one cigarette to the next, to the next, to the next, and she smoked so much that she would have cigarettes in multiple places around the house because she would forget that she had lit up a cigarette and put it in one room, and then she'd light up another one in a different room. And so she would have like multiple cigarettes around the house. She always had a cigarette. And that was kind of how I remember. She eventually did quit. Thank goodness she did quit. But I remember during that phase, I always wondered, on the Sabbath, she didn't smoke, right? Somehow this drug that was controlling her brain, the nicotine, was so powerful. And yet when the Sabbath came, you're not a religious Jew doesn't light fire on the Sabbath. She didn't smoke for the whole day. Right. And so I think it's a real testament. Yeah, it's a real testament to this idea of how much power do we really have? We're discovering that actually nicotine, believe it or not. Now, most of my work, I don't really talk too much about addiction. I talk about habits and bad habits, breaking bad habits and starting good habits. But it's, even the research around smoking is fascinating. It turns out that a huge reason why it's hard to quit smoking is not so much the nicotine. We used to think it's all about the nicotine. It's not. There's several studies that show it's not. It's not the nicotine itself. It turns out that a huge part of why people find it difficult to quit is that abstinence, that telling yourself not to do something, creates these internal triggers. It's almost like a rubber band. When you tell yourself, don't do it, 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 and then you finally let go of the rubber band, it doesn't just go back where it starts. No, it ricochets across the room. So when you tell yourself, don't do something, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, it actually makes you want it more. And that relief of the discomfort of telling yourself not to do something is registered in the brain as pleasure, as relief from that discomfort. So that's actually what people become, quote unquote, addicted or habituated to, is that the only way to relieve the discomfort of wanting to smoke is to smoke. But it's the internal trigger itself that's a problem, not the nicotine itself. So how does this relate to distraction, and how can we use this? We don't want to tell ourselves no. Okay, we don't tell ourselves no, because abstinence for many things, sometimes abstinence is a good idea, like with very harmful substances. But for things like your smartphone or even with cigarettes, telling yourself no can backfire. It makes you want it more. So instead of telling yourself no, what you want to do instead is to tell yourself not yet. Okay. And here's where we can use a technique from acceptance and commitment therapy called the 10-minute rule. And I use this almost every single day. So writing is really hard work. Okay. It never becomes easy. It never becomes a habit. I think I've written 2 bestsellers, thousands of articles. It's always hard. I always want to just go check what's happening in the news, or go check email, or go do something else, because writing is really hard work. So what do? I use what's called the 10-minute rule. The 10-minute rule says that you can give in to any distraction, but not right now, in 10 minutes. Okay, in 10 minutes, not for 10 minutes, in 10 minutes. So whether it's you're on a diet and, oh boy, man, that chocolate cake looks really, really good, but you know you shouldn't have it. No problem. You can have it in 10 minutes. Or, man, I really just want to check email real quick. Okay, fine. In 10 minutes. So here's what you do. So if I'm writing away and I just say, oh, this article is really hard. Is anybody going to like this? Is it any good? And where's this coming to? Like, when I start feeling those internal triggers, I say, okay, wait a minute. I take out my phone. I set the timer for 10 minutes. I put the phone down, and now I have a choice to make. I can either get back to the task at hand, or do what psychologists call surfing the urge. Surfing the urge acknowledges that our uncomfortable feelings, these internal triggers, they're like waves. Okay. And your job is to surf the wave, surf the urge like a surfer on a surfboard, because in the moment, it feels like you're going to feel it forever, right? You're always going to feel that discomfort, but that's never the case. That if you can let the urge crest and subside, just like a wave, this is how you overcome it. So I'll sit there for a second and say, okay, what am I experiencing? What is this internal trigger? Where is it coming from? I start talking to myself the way I would talk to a good friend. And what you will notice that 9 times out of 10, by the time that alarm goes off and the 10 minutes have passed, you don't even have that urge anymore. It's an incredibly effective technique.
Wow. And Nir, thank you for continuing to take us to the strategy and then the tactic. You tell us, here's how you should think about it, the why, the approach, and then also giving us the tactic. Before we wrap, Nir, I do want to ask, when you published the book, I know it wasn't meant for people with ADHD, but you had a lot of people coming out saying, wow, this is so helpful for me, or how do I apply this? So for folks who are in the ADHD community, a lot of them are entrepreneurs. How do you think about it? Did you intend for this book to have such an impact in that community? What's your kind of framework for talking to those folks?
Yeah. Okay. So a few things. So the ADHD community is kind of like an inverted pyramid. There's inverted, right? There's a huge community of people who are not diagnosed, who are sure they have ADHD and they don't. Okay. That's first and foremost. People who are not diagnosed, who think there's something wrong with me, and there's nothing wrong with them, right? Read Indistractable. If you do what I tell you, 99% of the people out there will have no problem learning how to become indistractable, okay? Then there is a second strata of people, as we move down the base of the pyramid, who are misdiagnosed. That we know that in America, people are diagnosed 10 times, children are diagnosed 10 times more frequently than in other countries. A lot of people are, especially as children, a few years ago, it's now gotten better, but many people are just pushed pills when they're just normal behavior. And unfortunately, this is really, I think, a real travesty that way too many people have been diagnosed with something they don't have because they want an easy solution, right? Doctor, this is, my kid is not sitting still. Give them something. Doesn't make them sit still. And so we're now seeing the repercussions of that. Then there is a small proportion of people who really do have this disorder. And for that, they require special assistance, special treatment, sometimes medication. And of course, I'm all for that if it's a proper medical diagnosis. Now, all three groups of people benefit from less medication. If you can find non-pharmaceutical means to get to your ends, if your goal is to be able to do whatever it is you say you want to do with your time and attention, well, I think we can all agree it would be better to get to those ends in non-pharmaceutical means, if possible. Okay, sometimes it's not possible, but if it is possible, let's do everything we can to exhaust the non-pharmaceutical means to help us gain more focus and attention to live the kind of lives we want, to do what we say we're going to do. And then as a last resort, turn to pharmaceuticals. I think every psychiatrist out there would agree that that's a good strategy. And that's exactly the kind of techniques that anyone can use from Indistractable.
Unbelievable. Amazing. Nir, thank you so much for sharing your years of experience. As you said, learning firsthand and then going out and doing the extra hard work to then let us know, all right, Dylan, ball's in your court. Justin, ball's in your court. Entrepreneurs, next geners out there, the ball is in your court. Nir, we are such fans of yours. Anybody who liked this conversation, which is everybody, go pick up Indistractable. You have no excuse. I want to learn from you. I want to keep learning and get the conversation flowing. Nir and Far, that's NIR and Far.com is where you can learn more about Nir and his active writing. Nir, before we let you go, any last bits of where folks can learn more about you or last advice for the next generation of entrepreneurs?
I appreciate that. So yeah, my blog is called nirandfar.com. Nir is spelled like my first name, N-I-R and far.com. The book is Indistractable, How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life. And there's actually a workbook on nirandfar.com that anyone can get, complimentary workbook. We actually couldn't fit it into the final edition of the book. So it's there on the site for free for your taking to get you started on this journey. Whether you buy the book or not, it's all there.
Next Gen fam, Nir Eyal, nirandfar.com, author, speaker, Indistractable, visionary.
Beast.
Thank you so much for joining us on Momentum Audio.
Grateful for
My
you,
pleasure.
Nir.
Thank you so much for having me.
All the best. That was awesome. That was awesome.
I gotta go change.
I felt so exposed, man. I felt so exposed in the best way. Because it's right. He's so right. He opened with this. He's like, everybody knows what to do. They know what to do. They just don't have the roadmap, the skills, the specifics, the strategy. They know what they want to achieve, but we are in our own way.
It's so powerful because it's promising. As hard and as daunting as the task sounds, we control how we are perceiving this world, this tech, these things that we thought with blame. And that's promising. So I'm excited. I'm still scared. I have a lot of work to do, but I'm excited by what's possible when you and I continue to work together to build these systems to better attack our priorities. I love that.
And as always, it's about getting 1% better. Today, when I'm attacking my inbox, I'm going to do my best.
2 times.
Think about this. 2 times max. 2 times max. I'm going to aim for 1 time. I'm going to aim for one time. But we'll see. We'll
get Nir back in a few months. We'll have him around too.
We'll see how it goes. Next Gen fam, thanks so much for joining us. Nir Eyal, Momentum Audio, incredible interview on habit formation, products, the attention, distraction, what the actual strategy is and how to approach it. We appreciate y'all tuning in and look forward to the next time.
We'll catch you soon.